Star Wars Outlaws. A game surrounded by controversy for both good and bad reasons, has turned out to actually be a game that I think is pretty good. People are understandably not a fan of the pricing of the game and the different editions, which I do understand. I hate this new thing a lot of publishers are doing, where you can get 3 days early access if you buy the more expensive edition. I think that's an awful reason to pay more. But for the normal price tag, you do still get a very complete package, and it's the much better option if you want to buy this game. Or you could just get a month of Ubisoft Plus and finish the game in like a month for 18 bucks. Aside from the controversies, the game itself has a lot to offer. Star Wars Outlaws is another Ubisoft game in many ways, but there are things here that improve on the standard formula. The game gives you a story that I think is one of the better Ubisoft stories we have had in years. The story follows a nice progression and is easy to follow. The characters are also on a much higher level than most recent Ubisoft games, and I was actually surprised about how much I like them. Combat is quite standard stuff, especially when it comes to the stealth segments, which I have some thoughts on. But there are cool things in combat too. I will go more in depth on a lot of these things and more. But I want to say this now. If you heavily despise the Ubisoft formula, this game will not change your mind, and I do think you should skip it. But if you're more on the indifferent side, or maybe even like the formula, I think this game might just be enough for you. I finished the main story after 15 hours, and I have some thoughts. This review will mostly be spoiler free, focusing on the first few hours of the game.
So, Bram, that for me?
No. But this is...
My data spike.
You start the game as Kay Vess, a scoundrel doing smaller jobs to survive. And with you throughout the whole journey is your little buddy Nix. At this point, I feel like every big character in Star Wars has to have a cute companion, but I'm definitely not complaining. Kay is tired of doing all these small jobs and decides to leave the planet. But to do that, she needs to steal an identicard from a safe at a club to hitch a ride off-world. This safe turned out to have an alarm, which forces Kay to escape and get off the planet fast. Your friend Bram gives you a hand and puts you on a new heist crew set to rob the most secured mansion on the planet. After being backstabbed and being abandoned in the vault, you manage to escape by yourself by stealing a ship. You crash land on Toshara and have to spend time doing lower scale jobs to pay for parts to repair your ship and get it running again. Eventually, you get contacted by a person setting up a crew, and he needs Kay. This individual wants to pull off the heists that you earlier failed, but with a better crew this time. That's the main focus of the story. You need to find your crew so you can pull off one of the greatest heists the galaxy has ever seen. I think the story and setup is very intriguing, and after finishing the game I can tell you that it definitely delivers on the story aspects. I don't want to talk too much about the characters, so I won't spoil much, but I do think they all have a lot of personality to them. Kay is an awkward but also confident character. She really isn't the most convincing with her words. In a way, this makes her endearing and relatable. And Nix is a character I was sold on from the beginning from just a cute design, but everything he does in the game does enforce my original thoughts. Nix is great. We also have ND5, which is a cool ass droid with a trench coat, and I do think he's one of the more intriguing ones in the game. Story and characters are both very solid, and it helps that the voice acting is very strong in this game. I can't think of a single character that had bad voice acting. I remember being impressed a lot of times by how good random characters in the world sounded. But do keep in mind, I did not do a lot of side content, so I can't speak for every single side mission. But while the voice acting is very strong, the facial animations were awful. I really don't understand how Ubisoft can be this rough with their facial animations. Back in the day, I remember their facial animations actually being pretty good. But the last game with good facial animations from Ubisoft that I can think of is Assassin's Creed Origins. But even that game was mixed. Outside of the facial animations, I think the cutscenes are good. A lot of nicely directed cutscenes that people actually put effort into. This game also has a mix of both in-game cutscenes and pre-rendered. I usually dislike pre-rendered aspects in games, but I actually like them here. These were the only cutscenes where the facial animations weren't really jarring. When it comes to gameplay, I'd say the game has 3 main parts: combat, stealth, and exploration. The combat in this game is a lot of fun. You have your blaster and you have melee. The melee combat is really really simple. You have a 3-hit combo and that's basically it. You can also do finishers on stunned enemies. Your blaster has 3 different modes, but I'll just focus on the first 2, Plasma and Ion. The Plasma mode works as you'd expect. It's the basic laser gun you see in all Star Wars movies, but it also has 3 different upgrade paths you can go, which will change how it works. You have Light, which is normal blaster mode, and you have Rapid, which is, well, rapid. And the third one I actually don't know about because I haven't unlocked it. Ion only has 2 modes, the Burst and the Surge. The Burst works as, well, a burst, and the Surge is more of a shotgun mode. These modes help make the blaster feel more versatile and less samey. You'd think just having one weapon would get boring, but I never got tired of using the blaster. I mainly used the Plasma mode because it was the coolest, but the Ion is more effective against shields and robots, so it does have its uses. You also have a feature that is similar to the Red Dead Redemption Deadeye, and it feels good. You can mark up to 3 enemies and just blast them all. It's fun. If you ever get tired of the normal blaster, there are enemy weapons you can pick up and use until ammo runs out, but it's very limited. Or maybe just throw a grenade instead. You can also use Nyx in combat to help detonate explosives or attack enemies. Nyx wasn't as useful as I would have liked, and it also didn't work a lot of the time. I'll talk more about this when we get to the bugs segment of this review. Even though I could use Nyx to detonate explosives, 99% of the time I would just shoot the explosives. Now, when I think back on the combat, I gotta say it's a really simple system. If you want something complicated, this really isn't that, but I quite enjoy the combat from what I've played. Now, stealth is even more bare bones than normal combat. You can do takedowns like in every single Ubisoft game ever, and you have a silenced shock shot on your blaster that has a long cooldown. Nyx can help distract enemies or attack them, and you can rush towards them and do a finisher. Stealth being so bare bones is a bit disappointing when you think about how often stealth is forced on you in this game. Going heads on in combat is often not the way to go. You are very vulnerable and can die very quickly. There are a lot of missions where you instantly fail if you get caught, and I hated this every time it happened. If I get caught, I want a chance to hide again, not just restart from the last checkpoint. I do think if this game was longer, I would get very tired of stealth. But because of the game's shorter length, I really didn't mind it. Exploration feels very inspired by Uncharted or Star Wars Jedi Survivor. A lot of climbing with Nyx on your back, which immediately reminded me of Cal Kestis with BD1 on his back. These segments are fine, but if you've played any action-adventure game in the last 5 years, you'll probably recognize the climbing and feel right at home. Sometimes you have to power engines up and a lot of the other standard exploration things. Now there are 2 features I want to talk about. The slicing and using the data spike, which is this game's version of lockpicking. I thought the slicing and use of data spike was really fun all the way through. When you use the data spike, you have to listen to rhythmic patterns and time the presses to the sound. This wasn't too difficult for the most part, but could be stressful in certain situations where enemies are nearby. The slicing was also really fun, and it's basically just Wordle. You have to guess the right combination of glyphs, and if it's the right glyph but wrong place, it will turn yellow. If it's the right place, it will turn blue, and if it's wrong, it'll turn to a red X. It's simple but fun. For both the slicing and data spiking, there are settings that can make it easier if it's too difficult. I think that's great for accessibility reasons. One of the strongest aspects of this game is the world. Before the game got released, they called it the first open world Star Wars game. This made some people say, what about Star Wars Jedi Survivor? Which isn't really an open world game, it's just bigger linear levels. But at times, I thought Star Wars Outlaws felt the same. In a lot of ways, it is linear, with places you can't go or invisible walls. Some of the planets are essentially just a city, and the cities are very linear. I also found them to sometimes be hard to traverse through. The cities being linear did bother me a bit, but something that makes up for it is the fact that they look and feel great. It really does feel like you're in Star Wars, and the attention to detail is there. People are having conversations and just living their lives, and the talking isn't just for atmosphere. Sometimes you can actually listen to them and gain intel from it, leading to side missions. There are actually a lot of different ways to find new intel and missions from just reading data pads and listening to people. The game doesn't really tell you this, and there aren't markers telling you to read the data pad. Sometimes you can find random people to talk to, and it's just interesting lore that doesn't lead to anything. That's just good world building. I found this to be a fun way to encourage exploration and interacting with the world more. There are also fun minigames in these cities, like playing Kessel Sabak, which I found to be fun. You can bet on alien horses, or you can eat food. Eating food was actually a lot more engaging than I thought it would be. When you eat food, you actually start a minigame that goes on for a few minutes, and it's a fun interaction between K and Nyx. You have to time different button presses, and it's essentially a quick time event. It's also useful since after completion you get food for Nix that can give him new abilities, like kicking away grenades from K. When you leave a city, there is a bigger planet to explore, but not as big as I was expecting. I think that might actually be for the better, considering a lot of Ubisoft's open worlds feel very overwhelming, but here they really focus on making what they had beautiful and atmospheric. The world does feel lived in, and there are things happening, but I did not feel like I did much exploring of these planets. I mainly just went where I had to go for the main story. That's how I wanted to play the game. There aren't just other people living on these planets, you will also find different aliens that you can pet and make Nix jealous. While traversing the world, different world events can happen like pirate raids or stormtroopers attacking. One time, I found wildlife attacking stormtroopers randomly. You can choose allegiances to different crime syndicates, and it will have consequences. If you have a good standing with a crime syndicate, you can get better deals and also some of the nicest cosmetics in the game. If you have a bad reputation with a crime syndicate, they will give you worse deals and some will send bounty hunters after you. The way abilities work in this game is dope. You don't just get skill points like you do in most games. In this game, you have to find experts in the world to unlock skill trees. Then, to unlock specific abilities, you have to do things similar to the ability you're trying to learn. If you want to unlock the ability to reduce noise while sneaking, you have to do stealth-related things, like lockpicking and performing stealth takedowns. All of this helps build a very atmospheric game, and something that also builds on that atmosphere is the soundtrack. The soundtrack is very much what you'd expect from a Star Wars soundtrack, and I say that as a compliment. It's very well done. Now we're on to the not so fun stuff. Performance and bugs. Something I think has been an issue in recent game releases is the over-reliance on DLSS and FSR, or just upscaling in general. Most games use it as an optimizing feature instead of a bonus. It's rare nowadays to play a game with good FPS without using upscaling. Without DLSS, my RTX 3080 Ti at medium settings 1440p could barely keep frame rates above 60 FPS in the open areas, and those areas are a lot less demanding than cities. I feel like I had to have DLSS on, which is a bummer. I'm not sure if this is just bad optimization or if this is just how demanding games are nowadays. You'll have to decide for yourself. I also had some microstutters that were a bummer but not experience ruining. Overall, the performance didn't ruin my experience. Aside of performance, there were bugs and glitches. My biggest problem was that Nix would very often stop working entirely. He wouldn't move at all, get stuck on ladders, and sometimes pressing the button to command him wouldn't work either. Nix wouldn't start working again until I fully restarted the game, which is a shame. The grappling hook physics was also a bit weird at times, but it wasn't really a big problem for the most part. Sometimes I had weird screen flickers or something, and the water looked kind of weird at times. And finally, at one point, a door just wouldn't open at all, so I was stuck inside. So all in all, Star Wars Outlaws is a game I really enjoyed. The campaign was shorter than expected, but that was appreciated, since I think Ubisoft games often get bloated. I think the story, characters and voice acting are all really good, and a strong point in this game. The gameplay aspects are quite simple, but I've found them to be very enjoyable. The world was great and fun to explore, with some nice music as well. But this comes with bad facial animations, some performance issues and also some bugs. I hope that the day one patch will fix a lot of these problems. But when I think of the negatives and positives, I gotta say the negatives are on the smaller scale and don't really ruin the experience that much. I think Star Wars Outlaws is a good game with some smaller issues. If you like Ubisoft games, I do think you will like this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you Ubisoft for the review code. I had a lot of fun making this review, even though it was a little bit stressful having to do all of this before embargo lifts. But that's a part of the challenge, right? If you liked the video, please give it a like, and if you want more content like this, maybe even subscribe. Farewell, my friends.